This is a search form that has been adapted from an NHS resource for use for you. It's really a key way to enable you to learn how to do searches and how to organize an advanced search strategy that you can use over and over again. So at the initial stage, what you really need to do is identify what the topic of your research project is. And because you're already in a group or in a research team or working on a research project, you'll have a broad idea of what that is. And you may need to be a little bit more specific. You might need to focus this a little bit more so that it's really related to what you're doing and what you're interested in at the moment. And really it's important to do that in your own words so that it's linked to exactly what you're interested in doing. The next stage then is to look at what keywords might apply, and this is really a brainstorming session. So you put everything down. You try not to limit yourself. You try and kind of just think of every possible combination, US spellings, English spellings. Maybe if you are familiar with another language, you can think about how that might be described in a different language, combinations of terms, phrases. If you have a phrase, then you're going to have to put a phrase in inverted commas so that you can look for that as a phrase later on. Sometimes it's important that two words are together, sometimes it's not, but really you're just kind of throwing everything down on paper. And you really probably don't need to spend more than like 5 minutes at this, because most of the keywords will be readily available to you when you start thinking about them. The next step then is to actually organize those keywords. So you need to actually boil them down and structure them in such a way that you can understand really what you've got, what types of things you're looking for, etc., because this will help you frame your search strategy later on. So let's say the problem that we have is going to be the detection of cancer, okay, and we'll say in the liver, just so that we have something to work with. The experiment then, in this case, is really about different methods. So you may have a list of 10 or 15 different methods that can be used for detection of liver cancer, from an MRI to a blood test. Okay, and these are the keywords that have been drawn from above. So you're actually taking the words that are up here and then you're categorizing them and organizing them under those different headings. The control might be the gold standard, and then the effect might be better than gold. So you're breaking down your idea into those four kind of areas under those four headings. From a clinical point of view, you might have a problem, so it could be a disease. The experiment could be, well, can I use a new drug or a treatment for the disease? The control could be people that are not treated with that new intervention or therapy, and the effect would be better than the current therapy. You can apply this framework to anything, really. It's just about thinking about what the problem is, what you're going to do, how you're going to ensure that it's controlled, so that should interact with the current state of knowledge in the literature, and then what the overall effect of that is. So what are you trying to measure? What are you trying to assess? What are you trying to detect? Once you've organized all those keywords, the next step then is to turn those lists of keywords into advanced searches. And you can do that by combining those columns if you need to, and they will give you more advanced searches. So what I mean by advanced searches is searches that use the Boolean operators like or, like and also like not. Most databases will actually take these Boolean operators because they're pretty much built into the logic of a database. But the way and the format they're put in can be slightly different. For example, the American Chemical Society uses a plus symbol instead of and in its searches. So what you do then is you take that idea of liver cancer, and we've taken liver, and we have a variant of hepatic, we have a variant of hepatocellular. Now you'll notice there's an asterisk here in hepatic, and what that means is that it's a wild card. So if I put that into most databases, it will search for anything that starts with hepatic and ends with anything else. Okay? So that means it kind of can scan through all the possible terms that are related to hepatic, some of which may be related, some of which may not be. The advice is generally to make sure that you have a long enough word before you use a wildcard, because if you use it at a short word, you'll get so many potential hits it will become unmanageable. So I have 3 possible options to describe liver. I have liver, hepatic, or hepatocellular. All of those are related to the liver. I want to combine those using and, so I have brackets surrounding those bits, so liver or hepatic or hepatocellular in brackets, combined with and, which means then I can put in my cancer terms. So cancer, neoplasm, tumour, American spelling, tumour, UK and Irish spelling, malignancies, and so on and so on. And the reason you have this kind of complicated search, and I could put in something else, I could have another and I could put in a not. And I could have not animals, because I don't want to get liver cancer in dogs or pigs. I want to make sure that it's focused completely on humans. So once you've got that, and you have something that's applicable to many different databases, then you can actually now pick which databases you're going to use. So many of you will use PubMed, some of you will use Academic Search Complete, many of you will also use Google Scholar. So what I would suggest you do is you're going to have to use multiple search engines and databases to really get as much coverage as possible and be as systematic as possible. Because if you think about it, what you're doing with this strategy is almost setting up a protocol. So if you decide to do the search today with this setup and you find 900 hits in PubMed, and if you do the search in 5 years' time and only do it up to today's date, okay, if you follow me, so you limit it so that you only search in, even though it's 2021, you're only searching up to October 2016, you should get 900 hits from the database, unless something has been added to the database in the meantime. But it's a protocol, so it should essentially be replicable. Now, from the coverage point of view, if we do a same search in PubMed and let's say in Google Scholar, and we get 900 hits in each, but of those 900 hits, 100 of them can only be found in PubMed and 100 can only be found in Google Scholar. That means then that we actually have 900 plus another 100 unique from Google Scholar, which means we have a total of 1,000 papers. So it's a 10% increase in our coverage, which is good because you may find something that's worth looking at. You can also set limits to your search, and you can really put any limit you like in this. You can put a time limit, you can put gender, you can put disease type, you can put humans, not animals, you can put basic laboratory stuff, you can have a geographic localization. Really, the sky's the limit here. However, you do have to have a good rationale for doing this. You can't just decide, oh, I would like to have, 10 years or 5 years or 2 years because it means I have less things to read. That's not really acceptable. And because you've put in all this effort into creating what's essentially a search protocol, you really need to think about when you're going to come back and look at it again. I don't mean look at the search results, I mean look at the actual search approach. And there's a very simple reason for this. When you're starting off in an area, you are, I suppose, looking at a very crude layout or outline of the landscape of that field. And as you get more knowledge, more features in the field come into play and more things become obvious. So it may be that 3 months down the line, something that's really very important to you just didn't show up on your radar at all previously. So now you have to adapt your search strategy, maybe combine what you had with something new so that you can be more focused on exactly what your core project really is. So all that taken together really is how you can build a search strategy. And it does seem like a bit of a formalization of it at the beginning, but really this is just to kind of make those approaches and those tips visible for you. And you may notice in some journal articles they actually will define their search strategy in the introduction or in the materials and methods. They will say, this is how we did our search. And this is essentially what they would have done to do that. there are kind of cascade effects which can happen as well. So you might read one of those papers, and then 3 of the references from that may be relevant but have not shown up in your initial search strategy. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all, and that's normal. But a good search strategy should limit that as much as possible, because you are finding all of the things that are relevant straight off.